Even though it's 2019 now, and even though I read 93 books last year, there are still a lot of 2018 books that I didn't get around to reading that I still really want to read. I think there's a tendency in the online book community, myself included, to just move on to a new year of books and forget the previous year as soon as January 1st comes along. In December, we all make our videos and blog posts and Twitter threads about our favorite books of the year, and then in January, it suddenly switches over to the books we're most excited for in 2019. Like I said, I do this too. I think it is great and fun and exciting to talk about all of the books that are coming out in this new year that we are excited to read, but I think I'm probably not the only one who still has 2018 books that I want to read. Whether it's books that didn't come out until the last couple months of 2018, or ones that you just didn't hear about until later in the year, or like me, I'm just perpetually behind in my reading. So instead of making a video about my most anticipated 2019 books, which I'm sure I'll do at some point in the next couple of months, today I'm going to share 5 books from 2018 that I'm still really excited to get around to reading. First is The Sisters of the Winterwood by Rena Rossner. This is an adult fantasy that takes place in Eastern Europe and is based around Jewish folklore. It's about 2 sisters, as the title suggests, and family secrets and a darkness that is lurking in their village. I checked this out right before Christmas, meaning to read it over the winter break, and just never got around to it. So I have renewed my library checkout and I am going to finally read this book. I love slow, atmospheric fairy tale and folklore retellings, and I'm excited about the Eastern European settings, so I really am hoping to get to this one soon. Last year I finally got around to reading An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir, but I didn't read the newest book in the series, A Reaper at the Gates, which came out in 2018. I first tried to read An Ember in the Ashes back when it came out a couple years ago, but I was in a fantasy rut at the time. All I really felt like reading was contemporary, which is really weird for me, but it meant that I couldn't really get into the book, so I put it down, and I'm really glad that I picked it back up last year because I realized that I actually really enjoyed it. So much so that I immediately picked up A Torch Against the Night. I loved the second book. I thought it was even better than An Ember in the Ashes. It really ramped up the stakes and made me care about the characters and the world even more, and I am super excited to see where it goes in book 3 as it ramps up towards the final volume in the series. I've just got to get around to finally reading it, like all of these other books. Next is What the Night Sings by Vesper Stamper. I actually didn't hear about this book until the second half of the year. It just wasn't really on my radar, but it got nominated for the National Book Award, and it's also on the finalist list for the Morris Award. It is a post-Holocaust historical fiction novel about a teenage girl who is now out of a concentration camp and in a displaced persons camp and trying to figure out what she's going to do with her life now. I've read plenty of historical fiction that's about World War II or the Holocaust, but I've never read something about what happened to people afterwards as they tried to rebuild their lives and cope with the deaths of their families and the horrors that they saw. What do you do when all of your loved ones are dead and you were certain that you were going to die too, and now you have a chance to live and grow old unlike the rest of them? I'm really interested to see how that type of story is told and explored in this book. It also incorporates a lot of artwork, so I'm really excited about that aspect. I love books that incorporate things other than words. Next up is another sequel, West by Edith Patu. This is the sequel to a book that came out in 2003 that you may be familiar with, and that is East. This is the new cover, but the old cover also had a polar bear on it. It is a retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is kind of similar to Beauty and the Beast. Basically, there's a girl named Rose, and a polar bear shows up to her family's house and whisks her away to his castle, and he's under a curse, and of course, she has to go on a journey and an adventure to break that curse, and they fall in love. It's a really beautiful fairy tale. It's kind of a classic YA fairy tale retelling. Like I said, it came out about 15 years ago, and I had no idea that there was going to be a sequel until I got this copy of West in the mail from the publisher. So I am really excited because I love East. It's one of my favorite fairy tale retellings. In West, Rose and Charles, the characters from East, are all set to have their happily ever after until Charles's ship is wrecked in a storm and he's presumed dead, but Rose is convinced that he isn't dead and that the shipwreck was not an accident, so she sets out on another dangerous adventure to save him once again. I'm kind of really excited for this idea of their happily ever after wasn't guaranteed. Like, they have more challenges ahead of them. Things aren't quite perfect yet. But because I wasn't aware it was coming out and I didn't get my copy until sometime in November, I think, I just never had room for it on my TBR list, so hopefully I will soon. And the final of my 5 2018 books that I'm still really excited to read is Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. Darius the Great is Not Okay is one of those books that's been on my radar for most of the year. I've heard a lot of good things about it and I've been wanting to get around to it, but there were just so many other books that I also wanted to read. But it is also a finalist for the Morris Award, Like What the Night Sings, and all of those awards and honors always bump books up my list a little bit in priority, so I definitely expect to read this one in the next couple of weeks. It's about a nerdy Iranian-American boy named Darius who is going to Iran for the first time in his life to visit his grandparents and meet his extended family, and he meets Sarab, the boy who lives next door, who is Darius's first real friend and helps him to find himself and his culture and feel more at home in his own skin. Like I said, I've heard great things about this book all year long on Twitter and Goodreads, and that has just culminated with it being on the Morris finalists, and I cannot wait to get to it, just like all of these other books. Anyway, those are 5 books from 2018 that are still very high on my TBR list. I promise myself I'm going to get to all of them soon. There are just too many amazing books coming out every week, every Tuesday. Let me know what books from last year or this coming year that you are super excited to read, and don't forget to join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for a write-in.